focus on those key metrics, because it's what every learning manager should be focused on. I know it's pretty easy to find those vanity metrics that make us look successful.
I found that people were focusing more on what the tech could do rather than the change that they actually need to make as an organization or as a team to make it.
They first started off with a general library of content that was personalized for orthopedic patients. Now they're leveraging EHR data to actually send customized video sets per patient.
So you can play with those numbers and it starts to look like, hey, everybody's adopting this platform. That is not a successful implementation or a successful transformation.
Right. A lot of these algorithms are based off the information that's available. And for it to be effective, it's kind of dicey. Hi, everybody. Erick Prospero here, and welcome to the Learning Lab. Today, I'm here with Lori Niles-Hofmann, and we're going to be discussing the 8 levers of EdTech that every learning leader should know. So, Lori, at a high level, could you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. So I'm an EdTech advisor to CLOs at enterprise companies, and I basically help them with their EdTech ecosystems. So be that their learning management system or their learning experience platform and how it plugs into the wider system of people tech.
Wonderful. And I know this book came out within the last few weeks, right? So I haven't had the chance to actually read it, but this is going to be a good chance for us to review some of the key concepts and share key insight. But what inspired this book? And what were some of the problems that you saw in the industry that inspired you to get this going?
Sure. So the reason I wrote the book, over my career, for my sins, I've probably implemented about 20 global learning platforms. I don't differentiate between a learning management system and a learning experience platform now. I find them pretty much very similar. They share a lot of the same DNA. So I've done a lot of these projects. Some of them, I was just basically the technical person. That would have been at the start of my career. So making sure all the plugins worked the way they're supposed to work and the data flowed where it had to flow and, making sure people had access, all that sort of stuff. Then gradually as my career progressed, I was more in charge of the fulsome, learning experience and designing the ecosystem. And I saw some go really, really well. And I saw some go not so well. Hopefully not because they were my fault. I will say technically they always worked from a tech perspective, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a transformation. So it was really after observing some of the common ways that things would go right. And I started to see there are really these 8 levers that you need to have some of them in place if to some degree in order to make sure that you're going to get the investment out of your learning. And then I also too saw areas where things would predictably fall apart. I knew if we didn't have one, particular area locked down, then it was very unlikely that it was going to be a success, no matter what tech we invested in. Even if we had, the most cutting edge, bleeding edge platform out there, if we didn't have these things in place, it was going to falter. So I really put it together because I wanted to give it as a guidebook for other people to not make the same mistakes. I'm a woman of a certain age, and so I've seen a lot of these things happen. And as more and more tech comes out in the industry, I found that people were focusing more on what the tech could do rather than the change that they actually need to make as an organization or as a team to make it work.
I love it. And we're going to jump into some of the 8 levers, depending on where you're from, on how to approach this. But I do have a question on what does a successful digital transformation look like? And what does an unsuccessful one? Because I tend to think if an organization is going through this for the first time, they might not know that there was a lot of area for improvement.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Eric, I will have you speaking with a Canadian accent by the end of this and saying 8 levers instead of levers. It's contagious. What can I say? Really, really good question, because a lot of times I'll start with what it isn't, but what companies measure. So when people say to me, I've had a successful transformation, they talk about engagement numbers. And those aren't good, but they're going to say, we had 50% engagement or we had, everybody was logging in more than once over the course of the first week. I mean, those are fine, but they're not telling you anything. I mean, it just means people logged in. And there's also too, a little bit of a trick. You can really define what is a login and what is a visit, so you can play with those numbers and it starts to look like, hey, everybody's adopting this platform. That is not a successful implementation or a successful transformation. When I talk about successful transformation, I am looking at it not just from a technical perspective in that everything works together and the data works so people can launch what they need to launch and there's accessibility and all of those sorts of things. What I'm talking about is, does it have business impact? Meaning, have you at the onset said, these are the things we wanted to tackle as a business? So it could be things like internal mobility. It could be things like targeted upskilling that I also call right skilling. So these things that you're targeting as a business and you can see the measurement and impact, that's a successful transformation. A lot of times people come to me and say, which LMS or which learning platform should I choose because I don't like mine? And I'm like, that is not a reason to do a transformation. Just because you want a better user experience. What are you actually trying to do with an organization to help the organization make money, save money, or mitigate risk? It's going to be one of those three things. And that's what you need to think about if you want a successful transformation.
I love that focus on those key metrics, because it's what every learning manager should be focused on. I know it's pretty easy to find those vanity metrics that make us look successful and help. I mean, every now and then they help fund projects, but at the end of the day, it's not a sustainable practice for actually leading a learning organization.
I would completely agree. And also too, some of those statistics that I've seen, can also be, really, really low. And so that's also a problem. But also too, it's not always just about the numbers. So like if I look at a piece of content say only 5% of people looked at it, I might say, well, that piece of content isn't important. Well, if those 5% of people were my exact target audience for that piece of content out of the organization, and they were at a senior level impacting major change, that 5% is brilliant. That's exactly where I wanted to be. I didn't want other people to waste their time on it because it's not targeted to them. So you have to really, numbers can tell a story. They can also be manipulated, right? So you can't just look at them, in the standard way, but that's a whole other topic.
Perfect. All right. Now, actually, I'm going to have some follow-up questions as to how we capture that specific data. That's always a challenge I've seen a lot of departments struggle with. But let's jump into the 8 levers. Can you give us a quick overview of the 8 levers, an elevator pitch, so to speak, and tell us more about them?
Sure. I heard you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Very well done.
I try to sneak it in.
Just say A. If you say A, I will be like, that's just like chef's kiss.
I'll sneak it in.
So the 8 levers are target operating model. This means moving away from your annual planning and moving into a more agile operating model. I use the example to think of yourself like an emergency room or an A&E that is triaging requests and patients coming in. So you don't see people in the order that they came, you see them in order of severity. Second one is data. We already alluded to data. If you're not using data, you have an opinion. And that's not where we want to sit. Third one, content strategy. That's changing immensely with AI. And what is content? Are we going to have static courses anymore? Probably not. Skills. Skills are becoming, and skills taxonomies are becoming the backbone or the spine as to how organizations are thinking about their talent. They want to know all the skills that an employee has, and across the organization, a view of all the skills that the company holds. It's kind of like knowing what's in your wallet when you've traveled to a number of different countries. How many pounds, how many yen, how many, I was going to say francs and Deutschmarks. That tells you how old I am, but how many euro you have, and understanding what those actually mean and what they're worth. So companies are really looking at talent in a different way. Stakeholder management, we've talked about, everybody knows this one. We have to have our stakeholders aligned. Less said about that, the better. Knowledge management and marketing, as a lot of our AI tools are scraping data from both knowledge management and learning data in order to serve up bespoke learning experiences. So we need to be in synergy with them. Ecosystems thinking, I started with that in the beginning. We can't think of the learning platform as its own entity. It is part of a continuum of people tech. So it's part of perhaps talent management system. It's perhaps part of a talent marketplace or a skills intelligence or skills inference tool. All of those are feeding together. And so we need to be integrated and think very differently about that. And finally, the last but not least, and I had to put this in, strategic business alignment. We all know this. But I would be remiss if I didn't put it as a lever, because a lot of times it doesn't show up in the project. It shows up in number of hours. They want to say number of hours, number of learners, and that's not what we're looking at. It is, what do we do for the business?
Love it. Now, this is kind of a loaded question, but I would love to hear your thoughts on which levers do organizations tend to underestimate, or which ones are mostly understood?
So stakeholder management, we know needs to be there. It's an art to do it well, right? So, and it depends on the culture of your organization. And I think strategic business alignment, again, we all know this. I won't belabor the point. There's so much about it. It needs to be continuously that focus. Data is not a new topic for L&D, but it tends to be something that we don't know how to do well. And especially now with the new tools that are available to us, we can use data in very, very different ways. But I think the new ones, so to speak, the new kids on the block, are probably around skills and the ecosystems thinking and content strategy. Those are the three that are really changing. Target operating model is simply just a different way of structuring your day-to-day work and your project management. It's not groundbreaking, and it might not work always for every organization. But I like it because it gives me flexibility to say, you know what, I'm going to do what's best for the business, as opposed to the loudest voice in the room telling me what to do. We're going to look at it through a business lens.
Love it. Now, what are some of the mistakes that leaders make when implementing a lot of EdTech?
Okay, so probably the first biggest one that I see is they think that EdTech will change culture, and it never will. It never will. It can be part of the process, absolutely. But I've had companies who say, we want our people to be mobile first. We want them to be sharing knowledge. Okay, I can give you a platform that has that enabled, has that functionality. But if you're not compensating people on sharing knowledge, if you're not giving them time to share knowledge, and you're not giving them access to their own mobile devices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you have a culture of fear, do you think anybody's going to use it? No. And I've seen this one fail time and time and time again. One of my favorite stories was we launched an app for a group of new graduates. And we thought, they're new graduates. They're going to want an app. They're going to be wanting to connect it to their phone all the time. They're going to be in there filming videos of themselves. And it's going to be like a little tiny Instagram. I can see you shaking your head. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And had we gone to IT in advance, IT would have said less than 2% of apps succeed here. So that's normal. And that's actually a pretty standard metric across the board. The other one was when we launched it, we got absolutely no uptake on it. And we're like, why? And then, of course, we were told, we'll put out a marketing video. So we did, and that didn't do anything, of course. And it was a number of reasons. One, these were people's personal phones. They did not want a work app on it. So there was distrust because they felt that they didn't know what it was going to be tracking on their phone. And it is their own device. They don't want it. They also, too, a lot of people did not want to use their own data plans, because they were paying for it themselves. So certainly not going to record video and upload it of themselves if they're not, tethered to a network and they're on a train. I mean, that's a cost now that I've put on them. And the other thing that I think is a common mistake is people think that employees will behave the exact same way on your platform because it has social, the same way that they would behave on any other socials. And that's not true. They're at work. It's not. It's totally you. I mean, if you even think about yourself, whatever platforms you're on, you probably have a different persona for LinkedIn and a different persona for Instagram, or just different ways that you use the tools for whatever you're doing, or TikTok or any of those. And so when you come into a work environment, people are not going to behave the same way that you think they're going to. And just because they're quote unquote younger or maybe more fluent in social and digital literacy, they're probably the least engaged group that I find. So back to the beginning, using EdTech to change culture within a company never, ever, ever works. But I would say the other common mistake is also to buying based on features. So without pilot testing. So basically they go, I love all these features. Wouldn't it be great? But they haven't tested them and they haven't looked at how it's actually going to be used within an organization. Every organization has its own DNA. And, you have to do a pilot and then just see how adoption takes place. it's kind of like they get people in a room and they say, what do you want on your learning platform? To me, that's the question of saying like, oh, you're hungry and you're going to go to the grocery store. It's like, no. Look at what you have in your pantry first. Look at what you're doing for the next week. What do you need to eat? As opposed to, ravaging, all the grocery store aisles to, get whatever you feel like. So that's the other common mistake is being sold on features, because features are not necessarily the end all be all.
That makes absolute sense. Actually, I've seen that problem before multiple times where everyone thinks this app or this certain feature, if we build it, they're going to come. And we work with a lot of external learners, and that tends to be a case. And these are big investments companies are making. And you don't want to be in a situation where you invest hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours, build something out. One of the things that I've seen works really well is creating trailers. And we implement fake door tests. And a fake door test is essentially you create a trailer or of an idea, and that where you showcase the features of a product that doesn't even exist yet. And you push traffic to it and see what kind of engagement you get. See if you can get any purchases, downloads. For employees, it might be different. It might actually just be completion rates or some sort of a survey that gets done. But at the very least, you're going to be able to find out if people are going to download that app.
Absolutely. And you should need to do all this testing. And, at the very minimum, if you can't do that, just go to IT and ask for some data. Like, where are people, what devices are they using? Where are they using them? How are they using them? Do you have accessibility needs? Like so many different things that IT already has that information and is likely... Everyone likes to think they're the first person to come up with an idea, but I can guarantee that somebody else within the organization has tried to pitch something similar and tried to operate something similar. Learn from their successes and learn from their failures.
Love it. And I can easily see the IT people being very direct and honest. Right.
Oh, yes. They would rather know in advance and tell you what will work and what will not.
Love it. Now, what's the type of mindset a lot of L&D leaders should have to avoid some of these pitfalls?
The big one is get rid of main character syndrome. Okay. This is not about you, and it's not your preconceived notions of what learning is. And it's certainly not about your success as a team. I think that's the biggest one. And I actually didn't put that in the book. I use the phrase, which is terrible, but it's one of my favorite insults is they were the Katy Perry of the space mission. And what do I mean by that? It's sorry, Eric. Sorry. So it's basically, you know what I'm saying, the person who hasn't done the math or the astrophysics or hasn't done any of those things, but because of their clout, they're invited in, they go up in at the big space mission, they hold a flower, and then they're the first one to exit and get all of the press, right? And so that's the Katy Perry of the space mission. And there's one for every EdTech project, right? And why you have to get rid of that is it's actually all about the learner. It's all about the person on the other side. And I've always had the principle that what I do is to make sure that I'm helping somebody on the other end of that screen stay relevant and not be made redundant. That's your job. That's the job that we have to do. So it's flipping everything onto that lens. That is the mindset. And it's really no different than how marketing thinks. And it's really no different. Like it's user-centric design. It's thinking of the user first. So it's everything from how they're going to be using it, what external pressures are they feeling, how are they supported, all of those things need to be put into it. And that, to me, is the only successful mindset to have when you're doing a project like a large EdTech transformation.
Love it. I was just thinking, like, am I ever the Katy Perry of any project? And it's something I'm going to be paranoid about for a while now. So I'm going to start giving more people credit.
Don't carry the daisy and wear a spacesuit. There, you'll be fine, Eric. I promise.
I think a lot of leaders are at risk of that too, where they have little involvement. They tend to jump in and get credit when credit's being given, and not necessarily like recognize their team. So
exactly.
It's just a proactive reminder for me to start doing that more often. Oh man, that is a rough insult.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking, oh man, that's I love it. I'm going to use that a few times, and
it's all yours.
I'll give you credit for it. All right, and this is a microlearning channel, and I definitely see microlearning as a feature when it comes to these strategic conversations, right?
Yes.
It's not like it's not a silver bullet for anything. And honestly, it's a feature, but what role does content format, short form or long form, play in achieving results? And or maybe what order does that come in? When should you start considering it?
So the thing is content with a capital C, I see as being something that's very fluid and malleable, hyper-personalized and targeted, and will be the length and duration it needs to be. What do I mean by that very ambiguous answer? I don't think we'll be serving, unless it's for compliance purposes, I don't think we will be serving a course that every person goes through that's exactly the same for every single person. What I think will happen is you will have an AI coach that knows a whole bunch of things about you. For example, where you're situated, who your manager is, maybe your CV, previous projects you worked on, what projects you're working on now, what skills you have, what skills you need to develop, all of those things to create a picture to then serve up a very hyper-personalized and contextualized learning experience. So it won't just be learning for, teaching you a methodology. It would also be drawing on things, for example, from knowledge management that might tell exactly how that methodology has been used in a successful, product demo or in a successful product launch. So it'll become something very specific. Now, with that, in terms of whether it's microlearning or longer form, we're never going to get away from longer form learning. I want to be very clear. Like, people think, well, you're teaching people faster. No. Like, learning still takes time. It does take time. That's why I get very frustrated. I'm a Duolingo junkie, and people say, well, I've been doing Duolingo for a year and I still don't speak the language. And I'm like, you did it for 5 minutes every day. Like, you don't learn a language that way, but you can communicate better than you could on day one. And language takes time to learn. I mean, I'm still trying to learn, more Polish, and it's, it's hard, right? And German's my other language. So, these things do take time. Where I see microlearning, though, fitting into that, it will also be personalized, but we will have the ability via a really well-trained coach, AI coach, to space it and to put it and insert it into context. So when you actually need things, or when you're most likely to apply things. So I see the learning experience designer is what we used to call them, or an instructional designer. That role is more going to change into a learning experience architect. So it's somebody who's identifying triggers as to when a microlearning might appear, as to when a coaching module might appear, or a feedback event might appear. It's putting those things together, but they will ultimately be personalized and AI driven.
I love that approach, just because, I'm starting to have confidence organizations are going to have the data to actually do that. Because that's the hard part, right? A lot of these algorithms are based off the information that's available. And for it to be effective, it's kind of dicey, because if you ask companies what data they have and what they're collecting, it's a mixed bag of answers.
This is correct. And so I think companies are going to have to become more integrated. What I always find is that, like, companies will say, I don't have the data. And I'm like, you might just not know where it is, right? If you talk to IT tracks everything. If you've ever, even yourself, if you have your own personal, not business, but like Microsoft 365 account, if you go in and start playing with the real backends and purviews and things like that, you can find things out to the minutia, but you may not have ever looked there or even know that it's there. So it's about having conversations with people who probably have data they're not even looking at. That's a really big one. The data also too is the problem can be that it's not clean or it's not structured data. And that is when companies say, like, where do I start if I want to, improve my learning? I'm like, the very first place you need to start is to get your data house in order. Your data house really needs to be in order. It needs to be clean. It needs to be sanitized. It needs to be in a way that it can be consumed and used by agents, and it can actually be meaningful within workflows. So that's the very, very first thing that you need to do as a company. And a lot of times too, that data is not ready. But that's a relatively newer thing. Like, that's not something I was giving advice on maybe 2 years ago, but now that's like the first place I start.
And I love the example that you mentioned. One of our, it's a client, but now we actually have a stake in the business as well. It's a patient education app, and it's actually they're doing what you said. They first started off with the general library of content that was personalized for orthopedic patients. Now they're leveraging EHR data to actually send customized video sets per patient. And what's great about it is the data is there, right? You have clinical information, the doctor preferences, and the algorithm will learn over time, but you have a good baseline of data. And it was one of the best case studies where I've seen that the hard part was done, right? Organizing the information, because building content's easy.
It is. Yeah, so, it's a personalization, exactly what you're talking about. And if you're an orthopedic patient, who's getting a hip replacement, you really don't want to scroll through the history of a knee replacement, right?
No.
Or that's a very stark example, but there's going to be a lot of things that just aren't applicable to you.
Sports recovery,
Exactly. It may also be too that the language is English isn't your first language, but there's not an ability to translate it, so it's going to be more visual. There's going to be a whole bunch of things. Cultural context is a really, really big one. So age is going to be, something to consider. If somebody is older and not familiar with technology, well, you don't want to have them clicking 18 times because that may not be, the most intuitive. So, I'm making a bunch of biases here, but there's so many levels of personalization that, yes, you would put into that, and it just makes for a much better learning experience.
Love it. I'll send you more information on the application. I know we can nerd out about that for a bit. Now, as we wrap up, I tend to end these podcasts with 1 to 2 questions. What's something that you're excited about in the industry, and who's somebody that you look up to that's helped you along the way?
So the thing that I am most excited about, and I even have this as my tagline on my website, and I don't know if it says more about me or what, but it is in a budding relationship with agentic AI. I think now there's agentic and there's agents, so I'll narrow it down to agents for right now. I think the possibilities for what agents could do for learning are astronomical. Even your example about the personalization, that's going to be agent driven. The way too that, say, for example, you had a course that relies on product data. You can train an agent to look at regular intervals at your product management software, determine if any deltas have changed. So say it was 13 inches and now it's 13 and a half. It'll automatically go in and find all the places in the module where that was, update it, and a human in the loop can just says yes, 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 yes. That's just one small example, but you can also get armies of agents, whole teams doing all sorts of tasks. Like I even see agents actually performing needs assessments and actually analyzing the data for what an organization or even an individual needs before it even goes to a business partner or that conversation happens. It would also be quite automated. That makes me super, super, super excited. But I have to say that the person that I look up to immensely in the learning industry, and she actually wrote the foreword for my book, is Julie Dirksen. And I love what she does. She is a phenomenal, phenomenal thinker when it comes to learning. And I know a lot of people will say, well, why didn't you pick somebody who's like on the AI side? Well, because everybody's like, there's an AI genius every corner right now. So, and I don't think it's about knowing AI per se. It's about understanding learning and learning theory. And I think that Julie breaks it down in such incredible ways. And that's what you actually need to know. That's the fuel to make all of these things run. If you're going to have an AI coach, so to speak, you need to train that AI coach to work as a really good coach and as a really good teacher. You need to understand the principles then of what good learning is. So that infrastructure needs to be there, and that's not going to change.
I love that perspective. It's only going to magnify your expertise in the industry, right? So
exactly.
Actually, I think I love Julie. I think she's actually going to be speaking at a conference here in Phoenix in a few months. So
she's also doing a double header with J.D. Dillon. So that I highly recommend both of her books. Highly recommend just connecting with her, following her. She is absolutely brilliant.
Perfect. Now, speaking of books, what's the best way where can people find them, right? I know at least your new book, I'm going to include a link to your website, a link to Amazon. Are those the best options for people to get a hold of you and reach out?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's so it's 8 levers with the number 8. And levers as in Levers, levers as in goodbye, I'm leaving. So it's you can reach everything, and all the news will be on there. How to get in contact. And there are links both to Amazon and also to if Amazon isn't working for you in the region where you are, there's another place that you can also buy the book from, or you can also download the ebook from there.
Wonderful. So, Lori, thank you so much for your time. Again, very insightful. I feel so privileged because I get to talk to people like you on these calls. So thank you again. I'm very humbled.
Thank you.
Very sorry I could not work in A. I tried, but
well, how about if I say it's been a pleasure, eh?
Yeah,
and
I was trying to think, how did I use it for seconds?
Almost. But thank you so much, Eric. I really love this conversation. Really thoughtful questions. You kept me on my toes. So thank you very much.
Of course.
Want to learn more about microlearning best practices? We've got you covered. Check out the video cards for more related content. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly tips and explore the description for a curated list of resources to continue your e-learning journey.